Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show as we head into week 13. We're going to talk about snaps and playing time. We're going to talk about alignments. Got a lot more information on that this week for those that have been following along. We have some injuries to talk about, waivers and players to pick up. We'll hit on all that. And with that, let's get started. Alrighty, I'm your host, Ricky Rodrigue. You can find me at RickyRod66. As we've been doing the past several weeks, we will go division by division, starting with the NFC and then into the AFC. We'll be starting with the NFC North, and let's get right into it with the Bears. The Bears played 71 snaps in this overtime game on defense this past week. Kevin Byard, once again, for the third week in a row, led the team in tackles with 13 tackles and 11 solo. Jaquan Brisker was put on IR. We've talked about that previously. Elijah Hicks, who had been replacing him previous week, left the game early, was replaced by Jonathan Owens. Last week I told you all Jonathan Owens is most likely the starter, and sure enough, Jonathan Owens played 100% of the snaps in his absence. Basically had an Elijah Hicks stat line of 8 tackles and 4 solo, with an exception. He yanked the ball away from Aaron Jones down near the goal line, so he got a forced fumble and a recovered fumble. He also had an interception that was unfortunately overturned by, I believe it was a Jalen Johnson pass interference call. So that's what you can expect with it. Hicks or Owens, about 8 tackles, 4 solo in that safety role. Hicks is not expected to play on Thanksgiving Day, so expect Jonathan Owens to be out there. Tremaine Edmonds, 9 tackles. TJ Edwards, 9 tackles. That's what you would expect roughly from them. Actually, you'd expect maybe a little bit more when they played 71 snaps, but not too bad. Montez Sweat was back up to 69% of the snaps. He actually had 3 tackles, 2 which were solo. He did finally get a sack, and he had 2 quarterback hits. Now, good thing the game went in overtime because that's when he got his sack. So that's Montez Sweat. DeMarcus Walker, who we would put him in the fool's gold category. 68% of the snaps, 5 tackles and 2 solo, a sack, a tackle for loss, quarterback hits. He had 2 of them, but not someone we're rushing to pick out. That's your Bears. Let's move on to the Lions. They once again played a very low amount of snaps, 55. We're usually looking for that 65, 66 range. They played 55 this past week. 48 the week before. It's hard to get those IDP stats when you're not on the field that much. No different than on offense. A running back can't get a lot of carries and all if they're only playing 48 snaps, 50 snaps on offense. So Alex Anzalone, starting with the linebackers, he is on IR. Derek Barnes on IR. Jalen Reeves-Maybin on IR. Jack Campbell ended up playing 100% of the snaps. Now, he had 9 tackles, 5 solo, and a couple of pass defense, which isn't bad for that 55 snaps. So expect him to continue in that 100% range. Malcolm Rodriguez played 89% of the snaps. He had 8 tackles and 7 solo. Once again, not bad for the low number of snaps. David Long, who was with the Dolphins released him when they claimed Tyrell Dodson, signed to the practice squad. Mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. He ended up being called up to the active roster from the practice squad. He didn't get put on the 53, but he was called up for the game. He did play about 24% of the snaps. Zeke Turner played 20%. Ben Neiman played 20%. So in that third linebacker position, there's a lot of rotation that ended up happening. I just do worry that because Malcolm Rodriguez is solid but not spectacular, by the way, no relation. He has a Z on the end of his name. I do not, and I'm GUE. But anyway, David Long could take over for Malcolm Rodriguez at some point. Just something to be a little bit leery of as the year progresses. On the edge, ever since they lost Aiden Hutchinson, we haven't had much to talk about. Josh Pascal played 89% of the snaps. Zadarius Smith, 67%. Levi Onwuzurike was down to 25% the week before, up to 40% this past weekend, but nothing worthwhile there. Not a single person on the Lions team had a sack in those 55 snaps. They also, early this week, after the games are done, waived James Houston, the former undrafted free agent who had 8 sacks in his rookie year in about half a season. Everybody went gaga over him. And with all the injuries they've had between linebacker and or on the edge, defensive end, and he couldn't make it in Detroit, well, and that's what I have on my notes. Well, dot, 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 dot. That means not much of an opportunity if he signs somewhere else. Don't get too excited if he does sign with someone else. Okay, let's move on to the Packers real quick. Um, they played only 49 snaps on defense. The 49ers offense without Purdy really struggled. Brandon Allen just didn't do the job, unfortunately. But that's where there's a reason he's a 32-year-old journeyman quarterback. But he is a professional quarterback getting paid, so that's not bad. But it was a blowout game on top of that. So when we talk about some of these snap percentages for the Packers between the low and the stats, be careful between the low snap count and there was a blowout and several people went to the bench late in the fourth quarter to rest and not risk injury. So Quay Walker only played 88% of the snaps, 7 tackles, 6 solo, 2 tackles for loss in the pass defense. I think you take that in a game when they only played 49 snaps. Edgerrin Cooper, the rookie who got hurt in the previous game, was inactive. So Eric Wilson had gotten the second most snaps when Cooper went out, so it was expected that maybe he's the number 2 linebacker because McDuffie had dropped into the low 20s. That's not what happened. McDuffie played 84% of the snaps. Wilson played 53%. Neither one had much to write home about. McDuffie 4 tackles and 1 solo. Wilson 4 tackles, 2 solo. Even Tyron Hopper, the other rookie linebacker that was drafted by the Packers this year, who hasn't gotten any mention on any of my shows so far this year, I'm going to give him a shout out because he played 14% of the snaps. That was his first defensive snaps all year. Not someone we're going to pick up, but just a quick shout out and not forget about him in deep dynasty leagues for down the road potentially. As a side note, McDuffie has not practiced, quote unquote. Some of these are walkthroughs, some of these are estimated because they don't really practice, but McDuffie hasn't practiced on Monday or Tuesday. High probability he might not play on Thursday as well. What that means could be a big workload for Eric Wilson because Edgerrin Cooper also has not practiced. So for Thursday's game, if you're desperate, you have some injuries, Eric Wilson is someone to take a chance on if you see McDuffie being inactive. Okay, let's go to the secondary where all kind of interesting things have been happening all year long. Jair Alexander did not play. So what did that mean? Keyshawn Nixon left that slot position, played more in the corner. Once again, he only played 88% of the snaps because they started taking starters out. But when he was out there, he played 93% of his snaps at wide corner. And that means he only had 3 tackles and 0 solo. Hope y'all are seeing the difference when the cornerback plays in a slot, plays a lot of snaps in the slot versus when they play out wide. Big difference, okay? So Nixon, as long as Alexander out, we're not playing him, folks. Javon Bullard played 84% of the snaps. Of those, he ended up playing 76% in the slot at 24% deep. So there's 100% total, okay? But remember, he only played 84%. Last week, he played 0 deep. This week, he played 24% deep. So once again, the Packers moving folks around a little bit. He did have 7 tackles and 6 solo with that 76% of the time in the slot/box in particular. So that's Bullard. McKinney also played only 88% of the snaps, similar to what you heard with Walker and Nixon. He only had 3 tackles, 2 solo. He did get an interception, a couple of pass defense, which was his 7th interception of the year. He ended up playing 33% of the snaps deep, did McKinney, which on the one hand, you're saying, but previous weeks it was 40, 60, and 61. What that says is that with Brandon Allen playing quarterback, they weren't really worried about getting burned deep, so they were more comfortable playing him and Bullard closer to the line. Now, Evan Williams, he did play a lot deep. Let's talk about that. He played 73% of the snaps, only 4 tackles, 2 solo. He played only 31% in the slot/box, 69% deep. In the previous couple of weeks when he played, he had only 46%, 54 deep. So a big change in deep. So McKinney did get moved up. Williams deep. That makes me nervous about Williams, and I know prior to this past game, I was telling everyone I felt very comfortable playing Evan Williams because of that usage. Now seeing that 69% deep, I'm a little bit more hesitant. I might be looking for other options here as we go into this coming week 13. On the edge, okay, so Preston Smith. It's been 2 weeks now that he's been gone. Let's talk about Lucas Van Ness. Last week we talked about how his snap count did not go up even with Preston Smith leaving. It went to other folks. Once again, this week he stayed in that 35, 37% range. He was at 37 to be more precise, 35 the week before. So Van Ness is not getting more snaps with Preston Smith going. The combo of Brenton Cox and Aaron Mosby have been playing more snaps. And of course, because of the blowout, both of them played a lot more snaps. But the fact that Van Ness stayed in that 35% range, that's just telling me, folks, dynasty time to try and trade him. A lot of people, it's their last week for dynasty trades, and it is definitely something I am looking to see if I could find someone to potentially take a bite of the apple on and try and take him off of my hands for something. Let's talk about the Vikings to wrap up the NFC North. They played against the Bears, went to overtime. They played 76 snaps. So that should mean a lot of good counting IDP stats after previous weeks, 59, 44, and 54, so which is way below average. So that's what you hope for. On the plus side, you saw Harrison Smith with 11 tackles, 9 solo. His previous high for the year was 8 tackles, so he came in with 11, boosted by that increased playing time. Andrew Van Ginkel, 7 tackles, 3 solo, yet another sack, a pass defense, and 2 quarterback hits. The guy just continues to produce. Someone on one of my dynasty teams, as we've talked about. Jonathan Grenard, 6 tackles, 5 solo, 2 sacks, which means 2 tackles for loss, and also 4 quarterback hits. Now, one of the sacks he got in overtime against Caleb Williams, I could have sworn Caleb Williams had the ball for like 25 seconds running around trying to make something happen in overtime. So that one was quite the fluke that Grenard got, but he still had another one. He's still basically a top 15 edge player for the full year, someone worth playing for sure. At linebacker, we've got some bad news. Let's start with Blake Cashman, though. He played 100% of the snaps. 100% of the snaps when they played 76. You'd certainly expect more than the 6 tackles and 2 solo and 1 tackle for loss. So very disappointing outing from Blake Cashman. Ivan Pace. It wasn't reported on Sunday anywhere, but it came out on Tuesday that it had a hamstring injury, and on top of that, it is bad enough that he got put on injured reserve. So Ivan Pace had no stats, only played 5 snaps, now out for at least the next 4 weeks. Kamu Grugier-Hill stepped in, played that roughly 59% of the snaps that Pace has been playing the last couple of weeks since Cashman is back. He only had 3 tackles and 2 assists. The Vikings did sign the former first-round pick of the Commanders. I believe it was number 16 overall. I always forget if it's Jamin Davis. Jamin Davis, I think, is how it's pronounced. They signed him off the Packers practice squad, so he has been, getting practice reps and should be in shape. I still don't expect him to leave for Grugier-Hill. I think he's just there for depth. So if you need someone to replace Pace, but no, you're just not going to get a lot out of that IDP if he's playing 60% of the snaps. But Grugier-Hill in a desperate situation, particularly when we get into week 14, lots of buys, maybe that's someone you can, desperately play. At the safety position, okay, I did a little bit of research for you all, and I hope y'all find this interesting. Cam Bynum, he played 92% of the snaps. Josh Metellus played 88%. Harrison Smith played 100%. So let's start there. We already talked about Smith's stats. But let's talk about alignment from a deep safety perspective. Bynum has played the last 4 weeks 71, 71, 73, and 80% of the snaps deep. So he was up to 92%, which was good compared to what he's been playing. But when you're playing that deep, that's why you end up with 5 tackles, 3 solo on 76 snaps. Josh Metellus played, like I said, 88% of the snaps. He had 7 tackles and 3 solo, But his deep safety count has been 13, 29, and 25 over the last 4 weeks. 13, 29, and 25. So the two between Metellus and Bynum, obviously that says you want to play Metellus. Now Metellus this week played 400 basis points, or 4% less than Bynum did in terms of total snaps this week. But Metellus has been far more productive and had been playing a few more steps closer to the line of scrimmage until this past week. So I want Metellus over Bynum out of those two, but really I don't want to play any of them, particularly if the Vikings go back to where they're playing the less than average 65, 66 snaps per game. Patrick Jones, last week, talked about it being a potential outlier because 75% of the snaps he played the last week. And I said, boy, those 5 tackles, 2 solo, 5 quarterback hits are fantastic, but he hadn't been playing that many snaps. Was that a change that was going to happen? Well, he went right back down to 38% of the snaps and basically had no stats. Dallas Turner stayed at 21% of the snaps and had only 1 solo tackle. Last week he was at 20%. So what does that say, folks? We are not playing Jones or Turner. Okay, a couple of things. One is I want to, before I go into NFC East, say thank you very much for all the feedback that people put in YouTube or reach out to me directly on in the comments. I encourage you all, please, if you have any comments, things you like, things you don't like, please put in the YouTube comments. Really helpful. Hopefully I've been reading them and trying to reply to all of them. So that's the first thing I want to mention. Second thing, IDP Plus, you can see the 20% off promo code props here on the screen for those of y'all that might be on Spotify that can't see it. The 20% off promo code is PROPS, P-R-O-P-S, and get a discount off a IDP Plus membership where we have great articles, rankings, tools such as snap count, such as points scored against, weekly scoring rankings for every position in terms of, Foye Aluakon, he was, if he finished 18th one week, 24th the next week, 3rd the next week, you can see his trends over time as an example. Injury reports, a lot of good stuff at idpplus.com. All right, let's go to NFC East, folks. The Commanders played 66 snaps. Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner both had 8 tackles, 5 solo, 1 tackle for loss. Louvu also had 3 pass defenses. So both had, I'll call it solid games. Okay, nothing spectacular. The big change, Jeremy Chin, who had 13 tackles at least over the past 3 weeks, only had 3 tackles, 2 solo, 1 pass defense. So I know y'all are asking, so I went to do the research for you. He played 33% of his snaps at deep safety and 3% at wide corner, so 36% kind of away from the line, away from the box. Previous weeks, that number was 28, 23, and 22% when he had the 13 tackles plus. So he went from that 20% range to the mid-30s. That certainly had some impact, but you wouldn't have expected it to be that big. I went a couple more weeks further back. He played 52% deep or wide corner 4 weeks ago, and then it was 35% the week before that. So during those 3 weeks where he had those 13 tackles, was playing a lot closer to the box. Was this because there's no rhyme or reason? I can't tell you, because it's not like Cooper Rush is going to make you feel like you should have someone playing more deep. Not sure the rationale would happen. If I was a betting person, I would expect, particularly after the Commanders lost, that I would expect a return to where he's playing a little bit more closer to the box/line. Okay, that's Ricky's forecast for that one. Mike Sainristil had played 100% of the snaps, 98% of those out wide, 6 tackles, 2 solo, 1 pass defense. The thing about him is really, and we talked about it last week, is that really hoping he was going to get a lot of slot playing time this year. That hasn't materialized yet. If Marshawn Lattimore comes back from injury from that hamstring after acquiring him from the Saints, which he hasn't played with the Commanders yet, the hope is that Lattimore goes on the outside, Sanders still moves to the inside, Noah I goes to the bench, and St. Juice stays at the other wide corner. That is my current hope and speculation this week, 2 days before Thanksgiving. But it'd probably be better to see it happen before you trusted him in your lineup. Now, where you have to play at least 2 quarterbacks in certain leagues, I'm playing him. but I'd rather see him playing more in the slot. Let's go into the Cowboys. They played 70 snaps against the Commanders. Deron Bland, Jordan Lewis were active at the cornerback position. Trevin Diggs was not. Bland played 91% on the outside. Lewis only played 23% on the outside. So, Ricky, who was the other cornerback that played on the outside? Josh freaking Butler. Who? Yes, Josh Butler, who was just recently signed from the practice squad to the 53-man roster. Okay, I didn't even bother researching who he was, to be honest, for you folks. I'd rather get to the numbers for you, but he did lead the team with 12 tackles, 10 solo, a sack, and 3 pass defenses on 87% of the snaps. Now, 80% of those were out wide. So guess what? They targeted the crap out of him. That's what happened. If Diggs is active, which is probably not probable because he hasn't been practicing and the game is on Thanksgiving Day, I'd expect Butler to be out there. But as we're getting closer and closer to playoffs, I'm sorry, folks, I am not trusting Josh Butler in my lineups. At the linebacker position, Eric Kendricks didn't play his normal 100%. He only played 90%. He had a very productive, typical Kendricks kind of line, 10 tackles, 4 solo. Didn't practice on Monday or Tuesday with a shoulder and groin injury. They play on Thursday. Last time Kendricks sat out, it was Damone Clark who picked up his snaps, not Maris Lufau. But also since that time, Clark has had some inactives and really hasn't gotten any snaps on defense. This is one that I'm avoiding. I'm playing Overshone, who did play 100% of the snaps. Wasn't very, very productive in his stats with 3 tackles, 1 solo. Luckily, he did get a sack for chasing Daniels out of bounds. It wasn't like it was this great sack in the pocket or anything, but he did get a sack, but only 3 tackles. So I'm trusting still Overshone, particularly with Kendricks out. I'm not trusting Lufau. I'm not trusting Clark. Probably if I have a spot on a deep bench, if one of them is out there, because of Kendrick's age, and we talked about the injury risk with him, which has happened the past couple of years, I want to try and get one of those on my bench and hope maybe for some upside as we get into the playoffs. Michael Parsons played 87% of the snaps, 8 tackles, 4 which was solo, 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits. Chauncey Golston played 80% of the snaps still, which was pretty amazing that he's been playing that many snaps. And he only had 1 assisted tackle where he had been having roughly 5 tackles, 3 which were solo, or 5 and 2 solo. But this week, only 1 assisted tackle. Now, he did get 2 pass defense, including an interception, because he did a nice job reading a screen pass. Ball bounced off of Brian Robinson's hands right into Golston's hands, which was great for him. Carl Lawson's snap percent came all the way down to 47%. Marshawn Nealon was activated to give him a little bit of depth. He only played 27% in his first game back. Do expect both of those guys to play a little bit more, take a little bit of the pressure off Parsons and Golston. Neither one of those guys had stats, those guys being Lawson and Nealon. So not much to work with there, folks. I'm not playing either one of them. At the safety position, Donovan Wilson only played 69% of the snaps. Wanye Thomas played 34%. Wilson is normally in that 95% to 100% range. Is there a changing of the guard potentially here happening? Sort of what we see in Cincinnati with Jordan Battle and Von Bell sharing snaps? Something to watch. Don't put Donovan Wilson in your lineup. If you need help at safety, might be worth a 1-week stash to see what happens with Wanye Thomas. Remember, he got the touchdown on the onside kick very late in the game. So if you got points for special teams, return yards, things along those lines, don't let that throw you off in terms of playing Thomas right away, but someone to stash on your bench. All right, let's go to the Giants here. It was a blowout game. They did still play 65 snaps on defense. Sorry, moving my notes here as we talk. Tyler Nubin again led the team again this week with 12 tackles, 5 solo, and he had a pass defense on 100% of the snaps. He only played 29% of the snaps deep. Now, his trend, in case you were wondering, was 20, 37, and 55. So I didn't go any further back to do the calculations, but what you see these last 3 weeks, a trend towards him playing closer to the line, 2 weeks in a row leading the team in tackles. We're playing Tyler Nubin, everybody. Jason Pinnock returned from injury, which means Dane Belton didn't play. Pinnock got 95% of the snaps. He only had 5 tackles, 2 solo. Guess where his alignment was, folks? Well, I'll tell you. He was 73% deep. Previous week, 64, 52, and 80. Jason Pinnock is not someone we're looking to target for our lineups as we head into playoffs, everybody. Micah McFadden, when he plays about 80% of the snaps roughly, he's usually hyper efficient in tackles. And he was with 11 tackles, 6 of which were solo. Okay, a couple of weeks ago when he had 81% of the snaps, he had 11 tackles, 6 solo. So in situations where they might be get blown out, which could be more the norm as they move forward, the other team will potentially be running more as a result. McFadden's in the game more, getting those counting tackles. He's someone we can play. Okereke, 92% of the snaps, 8 tackles, 5 solo. Nothing spectacular. Just a solid outing for an inside linebacker. We'll leave it at that. Drew Phillips. He's someone for future for cornerbacks and probably somebody I'm picking up now. Now with Deontay Banks and Cardale Flott start to take over the outside cornerback position and being healthy, Phillips is playing more in the slot. So while he only plays 74% of the snaps, 96% were inside, 4 were outside. And with that 96% on the inside, he ended up having 8 tackles and 4 solo. So even though he only had 74% of the snaps, that alignment is so key for him getting tackles. Someone I want on my dynasty squad, everybody. Kayvon Thibodeau, first game back, only played 63% of the snaps. He's usually in the high 70s, low 80s. He came back to 63%, only had 2 tackles, 1 solo, 1 quarterback hit, no sacks. Now, the thing with Thibodeau is his pass rush scores last year, as graded by PFF, were not that great. So his sacks were a little bit of a fluke based on that. Same thing this year. He's someone I'm looking to trade if I can, folks. Brian Burns, I'm keeping. Thibodeau, I am trading. Azeez Ojulari got placed on IR. So even if they wanted to continue to ease Thibodeau back in, I don't think that happens with Azeez Ojulari going on IR because of a toe injury. He joins his brother BJ Ojulari from the Cardinals, who went on IR much earlier this year, so the brothers can rehab together. Okay, moving on to the Eagles. Versus the Rams, they played 64 snaps, and once again, that became a blowout game very, very late, and as a result, you saw a big decrease in snap percentage on the defense. Nakobe Dean, 81%, Zach Bond, 83%. Nakobe led the team with 8 tackles, 5 solo, got a sack, a couple of tackles for loss as well. So by the way, when I don't mention it, folks, like if someone got a sack, that also means they got a quarterback hit in most cases, except like the Overzone example I gave you where he chased him out of bounds and it was behind the line of scrimmage, so they gave him a sack for it. But usually when there's a sack, there's a quarterback hit. Okay, so just keep that in mind for future if I don't call them all out. Bowen had a very pedestrian 3 tackles, 2 of which were solo. Part of what I was worried about, particularly when Brandon Graham got hurt and went out of the game, I was worried about, did he play more on the D-line on the edge? We'll talk about that here shortly. Cooper DeJean finished second in tackles. He played 97% of the snaps. He had 6 tackles, 4 solo, 2 pass defense. The last several weeks, the 97 this week, 97, 87, 96. So he is getting the snaps. They're leaving him on the field as that slot cornerback / third linebacker kind of role. That's great for him. Now, the one thing, Britton Covey, who's activated off of IR, actually did the punt return work instead of DeJean. So that takes away some stuff on punt return leagues. But the way they're using him, you can keep playing DeJean in that cornerback slot. Jalen Carter played 84% of the snaps. This week, he only had 1 tackle, 1 which was solo. Now, he played 100% the week before. This past week, or this past game against the Rams, as I said, was a blowout. Unfortunately, the way he dominates along the defensive line, as do others like Chris Jones, doesn't always show up on the stat sheet. Lots of S's in there. But this was one of those weeks. He only had 1 solo tackle. Keep on playing him. Now, Brandon Graham, the 36-year-old who was supposed to be retiring this year, as I mentioned, he suffered a torn pec, out for the rest of the year. He had a sack and 3 quarterbacks among his very, very active game before he left. Now, Nolan Smith ended up playing 61% of the snaps, which is the most that Nolan Smith has played all year. Part of that bumped up because of the blowout, part of that because of Graham being injured. Josh Sweat missed a little bit of time in the game because of an ankle injury, ended up playing 56% of the snaps. We're still playing Josh Sweat as a sort of number 2 defensive end, like a top 24 defensive end. Brandon Graham played 45% before he left. Jalix Hunt, the rookie with the great measurables, drafted out of a small college in Texas by the Eagles this past year. I can't remember which one it was. He was up to 38% of the snaps. He only had one quarterback hit. So Bryce Huff was on injured reserve with that wrist surgery as a reminder. So they started to get thin on the edge. So back to my Zach Bowen comment a little bit earlier. Zach Bowen ended up playing 23% of the snaps up on the D line, a lot of which was on the edge. That is not good from an IDP perspective. Now, the previous weeks, it was 15, 8, 2, and 9. So it seems like last week they were maybe trying to tweak it up a little bit to try and get maybe a little bit more pass rushing presence from Bond, but being at 23% of the 83% he played, that's not a good sign. A little bit good news is on Tuesday, the Eagles claimed Charles Harris off waivers from the Panthers. Now, Charles Harris is a former number 1 pick who never really became the stud that they were hoping for when he was picked, I think, 27th overall way back when. He's nearing the age of 30 right now. So he's a warm body, someone we're not picking up just because he's with the Eagles, but maybe that helps Bond to not end up losing snaps on the edge and staying more in the box. Something we'll need to continue to monitor as we move forward, everybody. Okay, last thing that is now, let me try that again, everybody. Let's move to the NFC South, and we'll try and get my notes to move forward here with me. My mouse doesn't want to seem to cooperate. Okay, here we go. We're going to start with the Tampa Bay Bucks, everybody, who play the Giants. The Giants did not look like they wanted to be there. A lot of star players, Malik Neighbors, Dexter Lawrence, among others, expressing their displeasure on the way the Giants played. But anyway, that's for the Giants. We're done with them. Let's talk about the Bucks. The Bucks played only 59 snaps on defense as a result of that, and it was truly a blowout game. So be careful about drawing conclusions on percentage of snaps. But a few key points. Tyke Smith was inactive with a knee issue again. Jordan Whitehead left the game with an injury. Originally was stated they thought he'd be out for the full year. Now they're saying, he has a chance to come back. Partially torn, fully torn pec. I'm not relying on Jordan Whitehead. And if I need a bench spot, I am dropping Whitehead. I am not hoping that maybe he makes it back for week 17, folks. I'm not taking that chance. I'm moving on. So what happened then? Christian Izien stayed in the slot where Tyke Smith normally played. Izien played and stayed in the slot. He played 83% of the snaps in total. He led the team with 10 tackles, 5 of which were solo. 96% of that 83% was in the slot/box with Tyke out. So when Tyke Smith comes back, I think he takes the Izien role back. I really think Izien goes back to the bench. The reason is Mike Edwards, who they picked up off of waivers, the Bills let him go. Remember, Mike Edwards has played with the Bucks in the past, just like Whitehead came home. Edwards came home. And when Jordan Whitehead went out, Edwards went in, played 42% in his first game with them that he was active. And the important thing, though, 92% of Edwards' snaps were deep. As a side note, I looked up Winfield. He played 54% of his snaps closer to the line of scrimmage. So what does all that mean? We're not chasing Izien. We're not chasing Mike Edwards. Unless Tyke Smith doesn't play and Izien has cornerback eligibility, you're going to play Izien. That's what we're going to do with the Bucks. Falcons had a bye week. Let's go to the Panthers. The Panthers played 74 snaps against the Chiefs this past week. Josie Jewell played 100% of the snaps. Now, when you have 74%, which is a lot more than the average of 65, 66, You would expect a lot of stellar stats from the Panthers. Well, that didn't exactly happen. Josie Jewell did have 9 tackles, 6 solo. He did get a sack, so that's great. Trevin Wallace played 62% of the snaps. He only played 69% the week before, but 62% of the 74, you'd expect that. Hey, probably decent stats. Didn't happen. 3 tackles, one of which was solo. He was a rookie, drafted a little bit later. He wasn't like a second round pick. He's getting some playing time. Can't trust Trevin Wallace in our lineups, folks. Ashawn Robinson, I keep on singing his praises. I'm going to do it again this week for those of y'all that need to play a defensive tackle / interior defensive lineman. 64% of the snaps, 8 tackles, 5 solo, a tackle for loss. Pick up Ashawn Robinson in those leagues where you need an interior defensive lineman. DJ Wanham in his second game back, 77% of the snaps, 5 tackles, 2 solo, a sack, tackle for loss, quarterback hit, of course, comes with that. But Wanham, even though he's not always the most efficient pass rusher, he seems to be effective in somehow pulling out a sack in his second game back before his stats start accumulating. Maybe someone you can pick up. Jadeveon Clowney had a great game, 64% of the snaps, 3 tackles, 2 of which were solo, 1.5 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss. So great numbers for Clowney. With Wanham on the other side and the Panthers building a little bit of momentum with Bryce Young starting to play a little bit better, it's more encouraging to play some of these Panthers on defense because there's a little bit positive momentum in the building happening. Lastly, at safety, in case you're wondering, Jordan Fuller, Xavier Woods, both played 100% of the snaps at safety, so nothing much more to talk about there. Let's move on to the NFC West, and let's talk about the Cardinals, who played 64% of the snaps against the Seahawks. Played 64 snaps against the Seahawks. Jalen Thompson, he was inactive coming out of the bye once again, so he missed the game before the bye week, missed again. Therefore, Dadrian Taylor Dimison, he played in Thompson's place. He played 97% of the snaps after playing 100% before the bye. He led the team with 9 tackles, 6 were solo, a tackle for loss, and a pass defense. I am playing Dadrian Taylor Dimison if Thompson is out again this week. Buda Baker played 100% of the snaps, had 7 tackles, including a sack, 4 which were solo. Baker had a lot of missed tackles. Now, Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet aren't exactly the easiest running backs to tackle. He could have had 10 or 11 tackles. I'm going to just chalk that up to a bad game, but when I was watching it, he missed a bunch of tackles. I didn't look up the exact stats. Kaiser White played 100% of the snaps. Mac Wilson played 86% of the snaps after, I believe it was 82 the week before. So after he had been trending down, he's back in that 80% range. But he's Mac Wilson, folks. So 4 tackles, 1 solo. He did get a quarterback hit. Just not someone you can trust. He's like a linebacker 5, maybe a low-end linebacker 4. So he's in that 50-55 range, someone we're not playing. Garrett Williams. So at Skywalker, asked me a question, which defensive back he should play. I speculated Garrett Wilson on the list he gave me. Now, I have to admit, I wasn't expecting an interception, but we would take that for Skywalker. So that can happen when you put your questions and or your comments in the YouTube comments. Keep them coming. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and put a few questions there. I'll try and get to as many of those questions as I can. But that's Garrett Williams had a 3 tackles and 3 solo, and I just wanted to shout out Skywalker. Baron Browning was up to 53% of the snaps in the second week post the trade coming over from the Broncos. 2 tackles, 2 solo, quarterback hit. Expect him to stay in that roughly 50% range, 50-55%, which is what Zaven Collins is playing. They've been doing still a lot of platooning on the edge. Unfortunately, because of that, we can't trust Browning, even though I could see him getting a sack and a couple of quarterback hits over the next few weeks, just someone we can't play. Darius Robinson, the rookie, inactive again. One of these days, he'll actually be active. Let's go to the 49ers versus the Packers. They played 73 snaps because they got their butt whooped, okay? The previous 3 weeks had been in the 60 to 63 range. They have so many players injured right now, offense and defense. Not good for the 49ers, including Nick Bosa being inactive. Leonard Floyd played 61% of the snaps, 4 tackles, 4 solo, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. He's had now 3.5 sacks the last 2 weeks. So at least he is trying to step up in the absence of Bosa. which is good. Yetur Gross-Matos played 64% of the snaps in his second game back, 4 tackles, 3 solo, and a quarterback hit. In deep leagues, when during the Week 14 bye week, potentially both of them we can take a chance on here. Fred Warner played 100% of the snaps, and despite them playing 73 snaps, he only had 6 tackles, 3 solo. In the week before, he only had 3 tackles and 1 solo. There's no sign of him being injured of any significance. You kind of wonder, and he voiced some displeasure after the game about the team performance. Part of that could be about his own performance, quite frankly. So Warner's starting to slip these past couple of weeks. I'm not taking him out yet, but something just to keep an eye on. Okay. Devondre Campbell played 93% of the snaps after 3 weeks in a row being at 100%, 8 tackles, 4 solo. Now, finally, the 49ers noted on Monday, I believe it was. So after the game, Drake Greenlaw will begin practicing this week. Will have 21 days to be activated to the active roster as a result. I've been getting a few questions about, is he worth picking up and stashing? I was previously saying I thought he was a good stash. Now, depending on who you had to drop, keep that in mind as well. There are certain questions that it wasn't worth dropping the other players to pick him up. If the 49ers continue to fall out of the playoff race and we get close to that 21-day window and he hasn't been activated, I can see a situation where they don't activate him. And remember, if they do activate him, I don't think he'll be playing 100% of the snaps out the chute. So I am not relying on Trey Greenlaw for the rest of this year. I'm looking at him for dynasty. If I do remember, he is a free agent. So another thing to keep in mind when players change teams, go to different schemes, their productivity can change as well. Not always for the good. So Greenlaw, that's your caution. Tayshaun Gibson last year started at safety along with Hufanga. Of course, Hufanga's on IR. Gibson was released, signed by another team, was suspended. They finally released him. I believe that was the Jags, if I remember correctly. The 49ers signed him to practice squad and then have now signed him to the 53. I was worried about would that impact things. It did not this week. Both Jair Brown and Malik Mustafa played 100% of the snaps. What was interesting, Mustafa had the better stats with 9 tackles, 3 solo, 1 tackle for loss. Brown had 4 tackles, 3 solo, and a pass defense. With that, I would have thought that Mustafa played more closer to the line and Brown played deeper. Oh, on the contraire, that is not what happened. Mustafa, in fact, I looked it up, played 66% of the snaps deep, while Brown was only 37% deep. And over the last 4 weeks, Mustafa's played 66% deep, 87, 66, and 84% of the snaps deep. I was really shocked by that. That explains why we had been seeing more productivity stats from Brown from an IDP perspective. But Brown, with those few stats on those many snaps, I'm very concerned now. I don't know if I'm going the Jair Brown route. Rams versus Eagles. Rams played 73 snaps. Now, of the last 4 weeks, as a side note, they played that 73, 77, 53, 80. The Rams are playing a lot of snaps on defense. That's not because of their offense. That's more because of the defense. And of course, this one became a blowout late. Christian Rosebloom continues to play nowhere near 100% of the snaps. He played 75%, but very efficient. 12 tackles, 7 solo, tackle for loss. The previous weeks were 64 and 62%. Omar Spates. I've been saying Spites. I've been corrected as Spates. So just so everybody knows, played 77% of the snaps. Folks, it didn't look very good. I got to be honest with you. Even though he's a former LSU Tiger, he did not look that good on the field. He got pancaked a couple of times, was out of position, etc. So be careful about playing him. But he did get 7 tackles and 4 solo. They might not have anything better to go with, so he might get it from that regard. Troy Reeder still hasn't had his 21-day window open, although he's eligible to do it. The problem for the Rams is that they've used up all but one of their ability to activate people from the IR list. And they have John Johnson and they have Troy Reeder to potentially pick from in order to do that. That's a challenge. So it could be they're just waiting out to see if they have any other injuries at linebacker or safety. And then if it happens for one of those, so that's on the current active roster, that may be who they activate. So the linebackers, Roseboom and Spates, may be safer longer than we think as a result. Jared Verse had a very good game, 7 tackles, 4 solo, and a very impressive flattening of the massive all-pro Jordan Mailata on one tackle. If you didn't see it, try and find it. He just ran over Mailata. It was pretty freaking awesome for a rookie. Let's go to the safeties. Quentin Lake played 100% of the snaps. He only had 4 tackles, 3 solo. He did not look very good out there either as well, folks. I got to be honest with you. So this is someone next year that'll get overdrafted, most likely. Just warning you now. But for this year, you can keep on playing him. He only played 29% deep. With those stats, I thought it would have been a little bit more deep, but it was not. So we keep on still playing Lake with that kind of percentage, not deep, meaning 71% closer to the line. Cam Curl played 100%. He only played 35% deep after being at 66% the week before. So both of those guys came closer to the line, more so. Cam Kinchins, he played 51% of the snaps, and he played almost 60% deep. So the Rams basically were trying to put more people closer to the box. They weren't worried about other receivers outside of A.J. Brown trying to stop Saquon Barkley. That didn't work. That's all I can tell you is it didn't work in terms of trying to stop that Eagles run game. Plan B for if they play any other good runners the rest of the year, they definitely need a plan B. Jalen McCullough only played 16% of the snaps. We could forget about him in that 1 week fluke finally. Braden Fisk only played 44% of the snaps due to the blowout. That was his lowest percent this year, by the way. But very productive in the time he played, including 4 tackles, 2 solo, and got a sack and 2 tackles for loss. Okay, let's go to the Seahawks and wrap up the NFC. They played 58 snaps, much lower than the 63, 76, and 77 that they had been playing. Ernest Jones played 100% of the snaps, 10 tackles, 5 solo. Tyrese Knight played that number 2 linebacker spot. The rookie had 9 tackles, 5 solo. Got him a cheap sack, tackle for loss, and a quarterback hit, of course, as we talked about earlier. So Tyrese Knight, if they're someone you can play, probably more of a linebacker type of 4, though. He's not a linebacker 1 or 2 for sure. Ernest Jones is a linebacker 1. Rayshon Jenkins was activated from the IR. When I saw that, I was worried about would it have an impact, particularly Kobe Bryant. Well, in his first game back, so we do need to caution, Jenkins played 50% of the snaps, only had 2 unassisted tackles in that. He played 86% of those, though, in the slot box / D line. So he played like a 3rd linebacker spot is what ended up happening with Rayshon Jenkins. Does that continue? Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Kobe Bryant still played 100% of the snaps. He played 90% of them deep. He did get 6 solo tackles, which was great. And he got that interception for return for a touchdown. So he did get the pick 6, which boosted his point total. Not something you can necessarily expect from someone playing 90% of the snaps deep. Julian Love played 100% of the snaps this week. Only had 2 tackles. They were both solo and 2 pass defense. Now, he played 74% of the snaps deep against the Cardinals, which is very interesting because previous to that, it was only 44, 39, and 35. Did that change because of the Rayshon Jenkins activation? It very well could be the case. Makes me nervous by playing Julian Love this coming week if I have other options. Let's let this thing shake out another week if we can for other options, folks. Last shout out, Leonard Williams had a freaking monster game on a very nice 69% of the snaps. 6 tackles, 3 solo, 2.5 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, a pass defense, and 4 quarterback hits. That is called stuffing the stat sheet, filling the stat line, whatever you want to call it. Monster game, whatever it was, he was invigorated to go and get after the Kyler Murray-led Arizona Cardinals. All righty, folks, let's move to the AFC East, and I know I need to pick up the pace, so you might hear me say last list on the tackle number spots. You can look those up in the box scores if I do skip through some of those and you're curious. The Bills were on bye, so there's nothing there. The Dolphins played a very nice 69 snaps, but there was a bit of a blowout game. Jard Brooks played 100% of the snaps for the second week in a row. He led the team in tackles. Anthony Walker played only 26% of the snaps. He was wearing the green dot. He injured his hamstring again. Anthony Walker, unfortunately, could have been such a great player, but he just had injury after injury after all these years with the Colts, the Browns, and now the Dolphins. Word was that he left the field crying because he knew how bad this hamstring injury was. Tyrell Dodson, who the Dolphins claimed off of waivers from the Seahawks. And remember, Dodson was leading the Seahawks in tackles. Not that he was that great of a player, but he was playing, and he was playing with the green dot. And apparently, it was reported he did wear the green dot when he went in for Walker. He played 70% of the snaps after Walker was out. 5 tackles, 2 solo, pass defense, which was an interception. So expect Walker to be out this week, possibly longer. Expect Dodson to wear that green dot, play 100% of the snaps. Brooks plays 100% of the snaps. There's your linebacker situation for the Dolphins. Zach Sealer, 67% of the snaps, but he continues to be super productive. The man's a beast. Keep on playing him. Chop Robinson, snap count was back up to the 51% range. 4 tackles, 2 solo, a sack and a half, tackle for loss, 2 pass defenses, and 3 quarterbacks hits. Now, we know the Patriots' offensive line sucks, so we have to keep that in mind. But remember when I made my comment several weeks back, for those who have been following me, that says he's been getting pressures, getting pressures. He's a great athlete, but will it actually finally translate? So you know what? He's at 3.5 sacks in the last 4 games. I must have been his good luck charm since I said it. As someone in deep leagues, edge position needed, I'm playing him if the offensive line that he's going against is not that good. That's the one caveat. If it's a stellar offensive line like the Eagles, not playing him. Against the Patriots, I would play him. Okay, you get the idea. Jordan Poyer and Jevon Holland played 100% of the snaps at safety. As a side note, Marcus May got released by the Dolphins on Tuesday. The Jets had a bye week. Let's go to the Patriots, who also played a very nice 69 snaps, just like the Dolphins did in that game. Marcus Jones led the team in tackles with 8. They were all solo, 3 pass defense, and for you return yardage leagues, he had 38 return yards. If he's going to play like that, he's someone, and you get points for return yards, someone you want to play in your leagues. The Patriots continue to rotate linebackers. Jelani Tavai only played 84% of the snaps, 8 tackles, 3 solo, a tackle for loss, and a pass defense. Christian Ellis, 54%. Only 4 tackles, 3 solo, pass defense. Taki Sion, 35%, only 1 assisted tackle. Second week in a row, he only plays 35%. The net of that, desperate situation, you play Tavai, not touching linebackers otherwise. Christian Barmore back in defensive tackle for his second game. 40% of the snaps last week, 51% this week. 2 tackles, 2 solo, a sack, tackle for loss, quarterback hit. This guy should be fresh as well. He had really great pass rush metrics last year on PFF. By the way, shout out to PFF for a lot of these lineman stats. I always want to make sure that I give them the recognition every week. So shout out to them. And if he's playing like that, I'm playing Christian Barmore. Get him in your lineup. I'm not waiting anymore. Kyle Duggar for the second week in a row, 97% of the snaps, 6 tackles, 4 solo, tackle for loss, and a pass defense. Not great counting stats considering they played 69 snaps, but he only played 33% deep for the second week in a row. So Duggar's someone we're still playing. Jabril Peppers on Monday was removed from the commissioner exempt list. He is eligible to practice and play. No word from the Patriots on plans. I'd be shocked if he played this weekend. Expect more of this platoon between Marte Mapu and Jalen Hawkins. Something to watch. Marpu was drafted as this combination linebacker safety. He was a little bit light in the pants for linebacker. They've been playing him more at safety. He hasn't put on a ton of weight. Is there a chance that if Peppers does come back into the lineup, Mapu moves into that linebacker rotation for the Patriots? And maybe as the year progresses, because he's a youngster, they give him more playing time? That is a possibility. I'm not running out to pick out Mapu, but something we want to keep an eye on, folks. All righty. And with that, we are going to move to the AFC North. And Ricky's going to adjust his notes real quick as he tells you that the Bengals we're on bye, so the Bengals, we do not have any stats for them. Let's go to the Browns, who play the Steelers in the snow game. They also played a very nice 69 snaps on defense. Grant Delpit led the team in tackles for the second week in a row. We played 100% of the snaps, 10 tackles, 6 solo, and a pass defense. The pass defense might have been an interception, but the wide receiver just literally wrapped his arms around the face guard of Delpit and hit him in the chest. He couldn't see anything between the snow and his eyes being covered. Juan Thornhill and Rodney McLeod at the other safety position continue to do a rotation thing. Thornhill 48% of the snaps, McLeod 55%. Even Ronnie Hickman got 32%. We're not playing any of the safeties for the Browns except for Delpit. Myles Garrett, monster game. 77% of the snaps, 5 tackles, 3 solo, 3 snacks, 3 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, and some snow angels. Now, last week he had no stats. 2 weeks ago, he had 5 tackles and 3 sacks. You're playing Myles Garrett, folks. You've got to keep him in your lineup every single week. The linebacker story, Jordan Hicks, 90% of the snaps. Devin Bush, 57%. The rookie Muhammad Diabate, butchered his name again. All 3 of them had 6 tackles. All had various varieties of solos. Along with that, Jordan Hicks did get a cheap sack as part of this game. So, but right now, it's Hicks number 1, Diabate number 2, Devin Bush, you're not playing. Martin Emerson had 6 tackles and 6 of which were solo, including tackle for loss. I went and checked where he aligned. He was 87% at wide corner. Folks, we're not going to be playing Martin Emerson as a result of that. Since the Sedarius Smith trade, going to the edge position, Okonkwo had 70% of the snaps this past week after being up at 63%. Not someone who's going to give you the productivity. He could get you an occasional sack if you're desperate in week 14, but not someone we're playing. Let's go into the Ravens versus the Chargers, the Monday night game, the Harbaugh Bowl. The Ravens played 69 snaps. That's after playing 78, 82, 72, and 69. So the Ravens should be racking up a whole bunch of counting snaps, folks. But given that, there was not a lot of counting stats that happened from an IDP perspective outside of Malik Harrison. Roquan Smith was inactive with the hamstring. We warned you last week, told you about the injury, told you to make sure you had other plans. Malik Harrison was the name I gave you. If you had a chance, hopefully you picked him up. Even though he only played 72% of the snaps, he was all over the field if you watch the game. 13 tackles, 7 solo, and a tackle for loss. Chris Board played 54% of the snaps, more than Trenton Simpson, who only played 43% of the snaps. Board had 4 tackles, 2 solo. Trent Simpson, 3 tackles, 3 solo, and a quarterback hit. Now, Simpson only played 43% after having 85, 90, 97, 97 the previous 4 weeks. Simpson even started the game, and it looked like it was going to be a rotation. I haven't seen any reports of an injury. I did see him in the game later in the fourth quarter, but only 23% of the snaps, 43% of the snaps. Not sure what the heck happened. I have to admit, I was playing against him. It was a close game and had Derwin James going for me against Trenton Simpson. First drive, Simpson gets 2 tackles. I'm like, oh, crud, I'm going to lose this game. Then he hardly plays the rest of the game, which was beautiful and fantastic, and I won my matchup. Plus, Derwin James got me a sack. Okay, I'm happy I had to celebrate with y'all. Thank you very much for that tangent. Christian Welch, who was released by the Packers, was a former Raven, mostly special teamer. He actually played 13% of the snaps at linebacker. So I cannot recommend to you all to play Trenton Simpson this coming week, even if Roquan Smith is out. Matabuike played 84% of the snaps, only had 1 assisted tackle and 1 quarterback hit. You keep on playing Matabuike just like you do Chris Jones, just like you do Jalen Carter. You keep on putting him out there, folks. Odafe Owe got another sack, 3.5 sacks in the last 2 weeks. He's got a very, very favorable schedule for for edge players for the end of the year. Someone we're playing away as the year progresses, particularly in leagues where you get big points for things like sacks. Going to the safety position, Kyle Hamilton played 100% of the snaps, only 3 tackles, 2 solo, 1 tackle for loss. During the broadcast, Troy Aikman talked about how they were really having trouble with the safety position. Eddie Jackson has been released, by the way, now if you didn't see that. Marcus Williams has been benched. Ardarius Washington last week played 100% of the snaps. And Hamilton, and both he and Hamilton played 100% this week. But Aikman, during the broadcast, talked about to stabilize the safety position, they were moving Hamilton deep, although they were curious what was going to happen with Roquan Smith being out. Would they move him closer to the line? Well, let's talk about what happened. In the last 2 weeks, Hamilton has played 65% of the snaps deep, which he did against the Chargers, 55% deep the week before. Prior to that, I looked it up because I know y'all going to want to know and need to know. I wanted to know 14, 14, 13, 16. Those were his percentages deep. So basically, he was 85% in the box, on the D line, in the slot, etc. Until these past 2 weeks, where it's been only 35 on Monday night and 45% the week before. Makes it challenging to play Hamilton if that's what's going to happen. And with Roquan Smith being out, you'd have thought maybe they would have moved him closer to help out, and they did not. They played all those other linebackers that I mentioned. Kyle Hamilton, caution about playing him this coming week. With those kind of numbers, don't expect high productivity. You probably have better options. Okay, Ardarius Washington played 77% of the snaps deep this week after 65% deep the week before. You see a trend, 2 deep safeties for the Ravens. Not a good sign. They're tired of getting burned deep, I guess. Even though Washington had, I forgot to put it in my notes and I apologize. I believe it was 4 tackles and 4 solo. He had 11 tackles the week before. I believe it was 4 tackles and 4 solo this week. A lot of that come from playing deep. So we're cautious on both Washington and Hamilton as a net of all of that. The safety position, and we're not playing Trenton Simpson. For the Steelers, they only played 58 snaps on defense. Patrick Queen led things with 7 tackles, 2 solo, 1 pass defense, and 1 quarterback hit in that Snow Bowl. Landon Roberts played 41% of the snaps, had 3 assisted tackles and a quarterback hit. Peyton Wilson was up to 53%, 6 tackles, 2 solo. There was some noise about Landon Roberts being hurt, though. I didn't see it specifically. Let's watch the Steeler injury reports this week, everybody. Cam Hayward up to 86% of the snaps. Now, granted, they only played 58 snaps, as a team, so that allows him to play a little bit more. But 6 tackles solo and 2 pass defense. Playing great for a 35-year-old. If you need a defensive tackle, you're playing Cam Hayward. Alex Smith was ruled out again. Preston Smith only played 29% of the snaps. The previous weeks were 28 and 36. Like I said, he is really the backup. It's TJ Watt. It's Nick Herbig while Alonzo Highsmith is out. Herbig played 76% of the snaps this week, 82% the week before. Herbig had 5 tackles, 3 solos, a sack, and 2 quarterback hits. Side note, Watt played 95%, if you were wondering. Deshaun Elliott jumps back up to 91% after being 75, 70, and 75% the previous 3 weeks, going out in obvious passing situations for DeMonte Casey. Well, what happened? Winston, because of the Snow Bowl, the Browns, who had been throwing the ball over the place, only threw 27 passes. That meant more running. That meant Elliott more on the field. That's what happened. In a normal weather game, expect Elliott to return to 75% or so. Casey, 20-25%. We're not going to play Elliott as a result, folks. And by the way, Elliott's stats, 6 tackles, 4 solo, and a pass defense.
Well, I was looking for a prize for my new league, a belt or a ring or a nice trophy. My IDP guys went and had my back. The best swag online for champs is found on Trophy Smack. RING, that spells ring. TrophySmack.com has the bling. Good, so good, I have to sing. Go and check them out, they have everything. I can show that I'm the master of my craft. I'm a champion in fantasy and I won't let you forget that. RING, that spells ring. TrophySmack.com has the bling. Use promo code IDPGuys at checkout for a free ring on TrophySmack.com.
We're going to move on to the AFC South, everybody. And we're going to start with the Colts. The Colts played 72 snaps in defense. That means the offense sucked again, only playing 55. There's been basically one good game lately where the offense has played a normal amount of snaps and the defense has, as a result, played a normal amount of snaps. As long as the offense is playing that way and being very inefficient and relying on bigger plays to get into scoring position where they do get their scores, the defense is going to benefit. The IDP players are. Nick Cross led the team with 14 tackles, 6 solo, 2 tackles for loss. Zaire Franklin, 13 tackles. EJ Speed, 11 tackles. Franklin had a sack as part of his stats as well. Grant Stewart played 38% as the number 3 linebacker. As a side note, no sign of Jalen Carley is being activated from the IR in any way, shape, or form. Stewart is the number 3 linebacker if one of the two, Franklin or Speed, were to get hurt. DeForest Buckner's just been so freaking good since he has returned back from the IR. Played 75% of the snaps, 7 tackles, 2 solo, a sack, TFL, 2 quarterback hits. Great job by DeForest Buckner. Bad news for the edge for the Colts, though. Tyquan Lewis returned from the IR. He only played 35% of the snaps, only had 1 quarterback hit, but Kwity Paye was down to 56%, Latu down to 60%, Odeyingbo down to 65%. Everybody was down with Tyquan Lewis's return. Now, they did play 72% of the snaps, so they should have had decent stats. Latu did get 4 tackles, 2 solo, and a sack, and a couple of quarterback hits, which were great. Kwity Paye, who had been red hot with sacks, fortunately only had 3 tackles, 3 solo. Considering the way he's been playing and for an edge player, I'll take it. And I'm expecting them to be on the field a lot, even with Tyquan Lewis. But overall total productivity for those 4 edge players, do expect it to ratchet down with Tyquan Lewis coming back. The Jags were on bye. Let's go to the Texans. The Texans played 67 snaps against the Titans. Still don't know how they lost that game. They had 8 sacks and still lost the game. The previous week, I believe they had 5 interceptions and lost the game. It would be interesting to do research, but I'm not going to do it. But if someone research, if any team has ever done that and lost 2 games, let alone 2 games in a row, the defense overall is not doing well. Although we do have some productivity from some players, including Danielle Hunter, who on 73% of the snaps had a whopping 7 tackles, 6 solo, 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits. It was the Tennessee Titans offensive line. We know they suck as well. We play edge players against the Tennessee Titans offensive line, everybody. Hunter was a beast, though. Will Anderson returned. He only played 51% of the snaps versus his mid-70s. Expect that to go back up. But he did have 2s across the line, 2 tackles, 2 of which were solo, which were 2 sacks, which were 2 tackles for loss, which were 2 quarterback hits. It was 2 plays, everybody, but very productive when that happens for the scoring system. Azeez Al-Shahir led the team in tackles. He played 100% of the snaps, 8 tackles, 5 of which were solo. He got a sack as well, tackle for loss, quarterback hit. Henry Toto was down to 31% of the snaps last week. I said, guys, you can't play him when that happens. Well, what do? They screwed around with us, and he played 94% of the snaps, but he only had 5 tackles, 3 solo, 1 pass defense. Not very efficient. Devin White, who had jumped up to 60%, was down to 25%, 2 tackles and 2 solos, all he had. Christian Harris, it was talked about by the head coach, Coach Ryans, that he may return after the Week 14 bye. That could be bye-bye to Toto, To'o, I think the right pronunciation, and Devin White. So just keep that in mind. Unfortunately, Jalen Petrie suffered an injury. He left the game with a shoulder injury, partially torn pec. He'll be out several weeks. How long? Not sure. I don't want to play Eric Murray. I do not want to play Jimmy Ward, even though he got the pick 6, folks. We're not playing either one of those guys. We're not playing Kalen Bullock either, who plays most of his snaps deep. We're not touching any of those other safeties. Team, move on from the Texan safeties. Going to the Titans, who only played 56 snaps on defense. Of course, Jack Gibbons went on IR. Kenneth Murray played 100% of the snaps, and for the second week in a row, led the team, although it was with a few snaps. Only had 7 tackles, 6 solo, but he had 2 tackles for loss, 2 pass defenses, one of which was a interception and a quarterback hit. So nice stats from Murray. Jerome Baker is Jerome Baker. There's a reason a lot of, Seattle was willing to trade him. Reason Miami was ready to not re-sign him as a free agent. 100% of the snaps, three solo tackles is all he had. Amani Hooker, unfortunately, hopefully y'all saw that right before the game. He had an illness. He ended up not playing. So what happened? Mike Brown played 100% of the snaps. Darrell Worley, who was a practice squad call-up, may have been signed to the active roster. Can't remember for sure. Sorry about that. Brown 100%. Worley 95% of the snaps. Brown only 5 tackles, 3 solo. Worley 4 tackles, 1 solo, 1 pass defense. You know who played 5% of the snaps that Worley did? Julius Wood. Now, similar to Josh Butler for the Cowboys and also Mike Brown, who I talked about previously, who the heck is that? Who the heck is Julius Wood? My apologies if any of their family members are watching, but he would be next man up if Hooker, for some reason, this illness keeps him out, but we're not playing any of those safeties. Jeff Simmons had a sack on 86% of the snaps. T'Vondre Sweat played 80% of the snaps, had his first career snap. We're not picking up big nose tackles, everybody. We're just not doing that. Okay. Another call out and ask for comments in the YouTube channel here underneath the show. I'm thinking about doing an off-season dynasty show. We would talk about rookies, both offense and IDP. We talk about positional projections. We talk about dynasty rankings. We talk about repeat rates at different positions and what that potentially means when particularly if you're starting a new dynasty league and redraft. If you're interested in something like that, we probably wouldn't start it till probably early April timeframe, roughly, and then go into the May timeframe with that. If you think that's a great idea, put it in the comments, but only if you're going to listen and watch, because if I'm going to spend the time doing it, I want you guys to let me know y'all would be interested in that. Okay. All right, let's go to the AFC West and wrap things up here on the AFC West side of things. And by the way, please subscribe to IDP Plus, 20% off. There's also, you can subscribe for a month to check it out if you want to do that as well, just for 1 month. Okay, Broncos versus Raiders. Broncos played a whopping 77 snaps on defense. Should be good for IDP. Well, it was a little bit of a blowout, so let's talk about it. Cody Barton played 100%. He only had 6 tackles, 5 solo. He did get a half a sack. And he got a pass defense and he got a quarterback hit with that half a sack. So that's Cody Barton for you, though, folks. With 77 snaps, you would hope for at least 8 tackles, but that's Cody Barton. Also at the linebacker position, Justin Sterner played a surprising 82% of the snaps. Now, Zach Cunningham was elevated for the 3rd game in a row. Quan Alexander's been pulled up for 3. Cunningham's been pulled up for 3. If they want to pull up one of them going forward, then they would have to sign him to the 53-man roster and they would have to drop somebody else. But I don't think they will, because on Tuesday, Drew Sanders was activated from IR from the 21-day window and was added to the 53-man roster. Now, I had tweeted out a couple of weeks ago that maybe he plays next to Cody Barton, given the people they were cycling through at inside linebacker. I got a couple of people push back on me, and I said it's very fair. I said that's Ricky speculate. That's Ricky's crystal ball. If Cunningham or Quan Alexander on Saturday do not get signed to the active roster, which usually happens before 4 o'clock Eastern, when all 53 man rosters have to be locked in, plus up to the 2 people they call up from the practice squad to play. If that doesn't happen with Drew Sanders being activated, I could see Sanders getting a few snaps at that inside linebacker position this first week. Okay, so what I'm telling you is I think it is worth taking the gamble to put Drew Sanders on the end of your bench. If I'm wrong, dump him. Okay, but for deep leagues and for the potential upside of playing that inside linebacker role and maybe getting 70% of the snaps and potentially more over time because Cody Barton isn't that great, that's the one I'm taking the chance on. On the outside, with Benito, with Cooper, with Jonah Ellis, well, thank you, Jonah Ellis, for getting that sack on the last play of the game against the Raiders. That really helped me win one of my leagues. So thank you very much, Jonah Ellis. It was ironic. I mentioned him last week as someone I want for Dynasty. I was stuck to play him because of Mageddon. I hate that term, but I just used it. But he got me a sack on the last play of the game. It was awesome. Okay, I digress. But with those three, and then Dondre Tillman, the fourth one, there's not necessarily a need for Sanders to play on the outside, though he can clearly play on the outside. Maybe it takes away from Tillman's snaps. Just so you know, Cooper played 71% of the snaps, Tillman played 29%. That adds to 100. Benito played 69% of the snaps, Ellis played 31. That adds to 100. You can see the one-for-one switching that happened there during the game. Does Sanders step in for Ellis? I don't think so. For Tillman, possibility. So maybe Sanders plays a little bit in Tillman's spot, and maybe late in the game, if it's a blowout, or maybe earlier in the game if it becomes a little bit of blowout and just they want to give him some snaps, maybe on the inside as well. Okay, enough about Drew Sanders. You've heard my speech on him. And I think that's it for the Broncos. Let's go into the Chargers, everybody. They played 66 snaps against the Ravens on Monday night. Deion Henley again played 100% of the snaps. Very productive, 10 tackles, 4 solo, and a tackle for loss. Denzel Perryman was ruled out before the game. I was wrong last week, and I apologize. I said because Troy Dye had stepped in when Perryman got hurt the week before and with Junior Colson on IR, I said Dye would be the next linebacker up. I was wrong. I tell you when I'm wrong. He only played 26% of the snaps. It was Nick Neiman, who's a special teamer primarily, who got the second most, but is only 49%. Now, it was a productive 49%. He got 8 tackles, 4 which were solo. But we're not playing Neiman. We're not playing Dye. The reason we called out Dye was if you were going to be desperate to play someone on Monday night, if you had Perryman and you needed someone just in case, or maybe even as a Roquan Smith desperation. Sorry that didn't pan out, folks. Really am. Derwin James, 6 tackles, 2 of which were solo. That sack that I talked about earlier. Thank you, Derwin James. Now, because of the Kyle Hamilton situation, I went and looked up Derwin James and I said, okay, let's check out his deep alignment over the past several weeks. Over the last 3 weeks, he's only played 14% deep, 12% deep, 24%. Now, the first 3 weeks of the year, different story. He played 55% and 59% deep. Week 3, he went down to 32%, and then it started trailing off significantly from there. So early in the year, they were playing him deep. Since then, they saw the error of their ways. Coach Minter, the new defensive coordinator who Harbaugh brought in, using him much closer to the line, moving him around. Great news for for Derwin James. Not so much for Kyle Hamilton, as we talked about earlier. If you missed that, rewind if you've been jumping around. Aloy Gilman played only 68% of the snaps. He got injured on the Justice Hill touchdown. He missed the tackle. It was one of those, I missed a tackle. It felt like, oh, crap, I missed a tackle and the guy ran for a touchdown. I'm going to pretend like I'm hurt kind of thing. My apologies to Aloy Gilman. He didn't come back in the rest of the game that I saw. I didn't have a chance to see for 100% sure, but the fact he only paid 68%, I'm going to speculate that's what happened. Elijah Moden is most likely to play in his spot if Gilman doesn't play. You could treat Moden as you would Gilman. That's the one thing I would tell you all. Tui Pulotu, whose name I've been butchering every week so far, and I got it halfway right this time. 77% of the snaps, unfortunately, no sacks this week after having 6 sacks in total over the last 3 weeks. He did have 2 tackles, one of which was solo, 1 tackle for loss. Khalil Mack returned. He only played 43% of the snaps. He was playing in the 80% range prior to this injury. I do expect that percent to increase for Mack, which would take away from a combination of Tui Peloto, Boza, and Dupree. Mack on only 43% of the snaps at 4 tackles, 3 of which were solo and quarterback hits. He did have 1 chase down where he looked very healthy. Expect that rate to go up and to be able to put him back in my lineup as a number 2 edge player. Joey Boza played 58% of the snaps, but as I've been telling you, the guy's made of glass. They showed him having 4 fingers on his right hand retaped after he had hurt his left hand earlier after he had hip injury. I mean, the guy is just always hurt, and I feel bad because he could be such a good player if he stayed active like his brother Nick. 4 tackles, 3 solo, and a tackle for loss. I'm just glad one of my Dynasty League folks that started many years ago, like 2020, I believe it was, I picked Nick over Joey back then because Nick was younger. Luck sometimes better be lucky than good. But Dupree was down all the way to 31% of the snaps, only had 2 assisted tackles. He was one of my foes goal from a couple of weeks ago. Hope you listen. On the Chiefs side of things, they only played 62 snaps. The week before, 73. Now, the week before that, it was weeks before that, 58, 55, 52. So when they play a good team like the Bills, it's hard to play them. Now, the Panthers ate their lunch, which was really surprising with Bryce Young. Either the Chiefs just came in just way too overconfident, or Bryce Young is improving a lot because the Chiefs' defense has been really tough to this point. Um, but right now, it's hard to play into the Chiefs at all because of the lack of snaps, to be honest with y'all. Najee Johnson, 94% of the snaps. He led the team in tackles for the third week in a row. This is an outside corner. He played 90% of the snaps on the outside. 8 tackles, 5 of which were solo in a pass defense. They're obviously picking on him. Maybe that's why Bryce Young looks so good. They found the weak spot to go after. Nick Boat played 100% of the snaps, but he only had 4 tackles, 1 solo, and half a sack. We're way past Nick Bolton, folks. It's name brand recognition only. Try and trade him. Drew Tranquil, 74% of the snaps, 4 tackle, 2 solo. The good news on the safety front from a playing time perspective, both Reed and Cook played 100% of the snaps for the second week in a row, but only on 62 snaps. Chamari Connor played 71% of the snaps this week, as 73% the week before. 95% of his 71% were in the slot, in the box, or on the D line. So that's how they're using Connor. But with the low snap count they've tended to have, and with Mahomes dinking and diming up the field very slowly, taking a lot of time of possession in general, I'm not playing those Chiefs IDPers right now. Last but not least, the Raiders, who played the Broncos. They played a very nice 69 snaps on defense. DeCamarion Richardson, the rookie, he played 100% of the snaps. Nate Hobbs was out. Jacorian Bennett was out. So the rookie played 100%. Boy, did he get picked on if you watched any of that game. He led the team in tackles with 8, 5 are solo, 1 pass defense. You know I joked about Josh Butler and stuff earlier. I don't think he'll play if Diggs plays. If you're really desperate at the cornerback position and it looks like both Bennett and Hobbs are going to be out, you might take a chance on Richardson. You might take a chance on the Butlers of the world, because the Najee Johnsons, because they are clearly being picked on, which is generating IDP counting stats. Okay? Jack Jones was limited throughout the week from a practice perspective, but did play 100%, had 7 tackles, 7 which were solo, including a pass defense and a tackle for loss. Max Crosby played 100% of the 100% of the snaps, but for the 4th straight game, he did not have a sack. Okay, I'm going to predict he has one against Mahomes and the Chiefs. He's going to beat one of those offensive tackles. He's going to get a sack. He's way overdue. It's going to happen. That's Ricky's crystal ball prediction for this week. Okay. He did still have 5 tackles, 4 solo, 3 tackles for loss, a quarterback hit. So he's being active. He's being productive. He's past that high ankle injury. He's going to get us a sack this coming week, folks. Robert Spillane only had 5 tackles and 3 solo on 100% of the snaps. Very disappointing output. Diablo played only 81% of the snaps, 5 tackle, 3 solo. It's hard to trust him. Lastly, on the Raiders, Tyree Wilson. Is the light bulb finally coming on over him? He only had 44% of the snaps, but he had 4 tackles, 3 solo, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, and of course a quarterback hit that comes along with the sack. That's 3 sacks in the last 4 games for Tyree Wilson. If he's someone you've been stashing on taxi squad, maybe someone worth pulling up from your taxi squad and moving into your lineup if you need him here for this late playoff push. I'd want to see him playing a little bit more, but opposite him is the Charles Snowdens of the world, the Caleb Chasons of the world. Yeah, no, he went to LSU. Sorry, LSU. But anyway, Tyree Wilson, someone to pick up or move from your taxi squad, but get him on your rosters if you can. And with that, at an hour and 23 minutes, and my apologies for running a little bit long again this week, but hopefully all the extra alignment stuff that I gave you all was worth the extra time, okay? I do want to say a couple more things. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. That's first thing. Please leave your comments in the YouTube. Let me know if you're liking it. If I'm getting too detailed now, let me know your thoughts in there. And with that, let's call it a wrap. Once again, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Be kind to one another. Be safe. I hope to see you at the Start Sit Show. Forgot to mention that. 11 o'clock Eastern Time on Sunday mornings on this IDP Plus YouTube channel. Join me and at Sean Teague. He's freaking awesome too. Getting great input for your Start Sits. Put your questions in early to make sure we get to them. And with all of that, good luck in week 13, and thank you for your time, and God bless. Bye.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.